So what if we were to use numbers and talk about how old is the earth? Let's do that. Let's talk about the human population. We know every 35 years the population is doubling. We've been taking the census long enough to know, even with famines, with wars, disease, every 35 years it's doubling. You do the math, the total population should be 10 to the 5,000th power.
What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? Tonight, we're going to be taking a look at a sermon by Brad Harrub, where he is going to use the human population as it exists today as evidence against the idea of an old Earth, or at least an old age, like timeline for human evolution. So we're going to be looking at a sermon today, see what's all fucky about it. If you want to fuck around and find out why Brad Harrub is completely wrong in his assumption that the earth is young, then please stay tuned.
This slide right here, talking about how if you use the Bible, things aren't all that old. You know, we've got the chronology from Adam all the way to Jesus. And the most common response that I get from well-meaning Christians is this: yeah, but what about the science?
That is a good question, well-meaning Christians out there. Hold this motherfucker's feet to the fire, because none of that shit makes sense that he's got up on the screen. Do you see how he's got this lineage? That this is how creationists, they do their dating in the Bible. That's how they know it's quote-unquote 6,000 years old. And then it diverges between the two, and it has two different lineages for Jesus, right? Now, there's a really big problem with this. For one thing, the Bible doesn't actually say that the two lineages are like one is Mary and one is Joseph. This is an assumption that is made by creationists. Two, this is particularly fucky because they occur in two different books, in two different gospels. So they're trying to record the same lineage, yet they record different lineages. And then the third thing is Joseph isn't even Jesus's dad. Like, you just never hear about Joseph when Jesus gets older. You hear about Joseph while he's a kid, obviously, but you don't hear about him when he gets older and shit. It's not like his dad's around to give him advice about not getting pinned up on a cross by the fucking Romans. So I don't even understand why you would want to, like, record this as the line of Joseph. He has literally nothing to do with the lineage of Jesus. Supposedly, if at least you go by Matthew and Mark's accounts of Jesus's birth and stuff, Jesus, he fucked his own mom and then had himself, like, because Jesus is God and everything like that. God impregnated Mary, or I guess used the Holy Spirit to impregnate Mary. There's no way that Joseph could ever be Jesus's dad. I have no idea why he's even presenting it like this, other than he's just religiously ridiculous is what he is. All right, let's so the last thing he said was holding, what about the science, and holding his feet to the fire about the science of it because it's all bullshit. Let's see what he has to say.
And their point is this: they believe that science and the Bible are at odds because that's what we've been taught.
That's based on reading the Bible. There's plenty of things in the Bible that just don't make sense scientifically. The entire Genesis account, the flood account, all of the things that supposedly happened to the Israelite people in history didn't actually happen to the Israelite people in history. The numbers that are recorded in the Bible of the Jewish people in the Old Testament are wrong. So I don't understand why you would think science and the Bible don't conflict. It definitely does. And I say this because science is meant to describe reality, right? To the best of our ability, describe what really happens in reality. If the Bible does not comport with reality, then it is definitely anti-science.
Folks, there's no truth in that at all. God is the author of science, okay? True science points back to Him.
I like how he's trying to gatekeep fucking science now. True science only reveals God. Bullshit fucking science says that he doesn't exist. Which, to be fair, no science says that God doesn't exist. We could definitely say that science disproves the biblical version of God, but there's no science that proves that God doesn't exist. But he's talking about the Christian God, so that's what he's saying. True science comes to the conclusion that God exists. Fake ass bullshit science only suggests that God may not exist. So fuck that kind of science.
When they say, yeah, but what about the science? That's when I get all excited, because when you stop and you really look at science, here's what you discover. Yeah, we've got a man-made theory that a lot of people have bought into that talks about millions and billions of years. But when you look at other actual evidence, like population statistics, numbers, you realize numbers can't lie, right?
Aha! I have to stop you immediately here, because while numbers don't lie, people use numbers to lie, or rather misrepresent things. Also, you can get shit wrong, which you do here in your little sermon. You get shit wrong about population statistics and just basic fucking math. While numbers don't lie, you definitely are misrepresenting the information. I won't go as far as to say that you're lying about them, but you're definitely manipulating the information in order to tell the narrative that you want to, just like any good conspiracy theorist would.
They're not able to lie. So what if we were to use numbers and talk about how old is the earth?
Oh, so when he's talking about the theory, he talks about it as like a monolithic theory of millions and millions of years, right? That's not a theory. That's proven scientific fact. There's multiple ways in which you can prove it, either through radiocarbon dating or other various methods. Just looking out into the stars at night proves to you that there have been millions and millions and billions of years that have come before us, okay? This is just basic physics at this point. It's a fact that the universe is billions of years old, 13.5 billion to be precise. So when he's talking about this, as a monolithic theory, he means a general theory, not a scientific theory. But even so, he's talking about multiple different scientific theories. He's talking about the scientific theory of the Big Bang. He's talking about the scientific theory of evolution. He's talking about the principle of uniformitarianism. He's talking about a plethora of things as a monolithic science, like little pile of shit. But it's not really a pile of shit. In fact, this is the bedrock of like all of science here. Just the fact that we can describe reality, and these are things that we know without doubt to be true.
Let's do that. Let's talk about the human population. We know every 35 years the population is doubling. We've been taking the census long enough to know, even with famines, with wars, disease, every 35 years, it's doubling. So if you guys think traffic on I-25 is bad now, just wait. It's coming.
Just like with any conspiracy theorist that is looking to tell a specific narrative, Brad Harrub here is using a small kernel of knowledge and then extrapolating from it, misrepresenting information, and possibly even leaving out information that he really should communicate to his audience. Like, for instance, so what is doubling time, and what does it mean to determine how fast a population doubles in size? Okay, so what is doubling time? Basically, doubling time is the amount of time it takes for a given quantity to double in size or value at a constant growth rate. We can find the doubling time for a population undergoing exponential growth by using the rule of 70. To do this, we divide 70 by the growth rate, R. So basically, if you have 2% annual population growth in a group, in this case, the human species, then you would divide 70 by 2, and that would be the amount of time it would take for that group to double in size given a constant population growth. And in this case, it's 35 years. Now, where he's getting this information from, and I'm so glad that I'm able to just fucking pop this shit up here for you guys. What Brad's numbers represent are a constant growth rate of 2% every single year. As you can see on this graph, we have encountered the 2%, like back in 1968, 67, 66. Like we hovered around that globally for a while, but we've been declining over years. numbers. All this does is highlight the variability of the population growth. Now, this is data taken from 1950, but even prior to that, you could tell that the population growth is not going to be a constant number. Like, it's not constantly 2% the entire time of human existence. Obviously, when plagues happen, that's gonna be a really big dent on the population growth for a long time. When wars are fought, that's gonna be a big dent on it. And our history is rife with all of those things. Not to mention the fact that our medical knowledge has increased significantly, even from the 1950s. It hasn't remained the 2%. But Brad, in order for his information to pan out here for the bullshit that he's peddling to his audience, it has to be a constant. But when you actually look at the data, the population growth rate, you will see that it simply doesn't support the conclusion that he's coming to, and that's a finite 35 years for doubling constantly throughout time. I just wanted you guys to have the full range of information about the 35 years, how it got a little bit of truth in it, but it is not truth like as far as being able to determine the numbers that he's wanting to determine to make this argument from human population. So I'm gonna let him continue and let him completely spell out his whole idea here.
And if you think you guys are in forever construction, guess what? It's just that's it, forever. So let's do this. Let's say we got two people. We'll call them Adam and Eve. This started 1 million years ago. Now, that's conservative because most evolutionists would put Homo sapiens starting about 3 million years ago.
When did Homo sapien first appear? Bones of primitive Homo sapiens appear 300,000 years ago in Africa with brains as large or larger than ours. They're followed by anatomically modern Homo sapiens, at least 200,000. No. So yeah, he's totally wrong on how long ago Homo sapiens, which is what he's meaning here. What he's talking about is when the first organism in the Homo genus appeared, and that would be 2.5 million years ago. Those are not human beings. So he's kind of conflating a couple terms here with who Homo sapiens are or who he's actually talking about. This really doesn't come as a big surprise. He doesn't really seem to know what he's talking about. But even if Homo sapiens first developed a million years ago, if we were to give him that, then his math would still be wrong here. He's trying to lay out his method for determining how big the population would be considering these things. He doesn't actually use the population growth that was present at that time. Like, as far as what we can even hope to know about the population sizes of Homo sapiens when they first appeared. He's not using the actual population growth, which is essential to determining the doubling speed of a population. What he's using is some kind of weird mathematical formulation using the average generation and the average family size. And I mean, he thinks that he's arguing a fortiori, which means from the strongest position. He thinks that he's arguing from the strongest position, but he's really not. He's building a straw man, and then he's going to tear this straw man down with bullshit figures.
1 million years ago, average generation, 42 years, again, staying very conservative. Average family size, 2.4 kids per family. That's really conservative because most of you know your grandparents, great-grandparents, they had much, much bigger families, right? You do the math, the total population should be 10 to the 5,000th power. That means a 10 with 5,000 zeros after.
Yeah, that definitely seems ridiculous. It's also not scientific. It also doesn't represent anything that would be reality, even if Homo sapiens appeared 1 million years ago, let alone 200 or 300,000 years ago. So the bullshit number that you just pulled out of your ass using bad math doesn't really help your argument here because it's bad math. Maybe I feel like he needs to go back to school, an actual school, and take more calculus or take more statistics or something like that. I'm not claiming to be the great statistician, right, or anything like that. I'm not claiming to be any kind of things like that, but I know basic statistics and like the population math. Like, I know that pretty well. Also, just to say, Brad Harrub is a doctor, but he's a medical doctor, which is how would your stepdad put it there, honey? A doctor that can do something, a doctor that can help people. Well, in this case, I would ask for a different doctor if I had to go and see him, but. You know, he's a doctor that could help somebody. He's not a doctor in the respect that, like, he's not a mathematician or something like that, or some kind of field that would actually give him the authority to just say this shit and be taken without question. That's right. You shouldn't do that with anybody, but he's speaking in that kind of way, you know?
Now, I could only fit 1,000 on this screen. That means we need 4 more screens of zeros coming out all the way out into the floor.
Oh, you mean out of your ass? Okay. I agree. More zeros coming out of your ass is definitely what's needed.
10 to the 5,000 power. Here's the interesting thing about that. Out of the entire known universe, everything that the Hubble has looked at, they've done the math, and it would only hold somewhere around 10 to the 100th people. I just said 10 to the 5,000. That means for every area the size of a quarter, there should be 500 people.
You see, none of this even matters because his math is bad. He uses bad math to come to a bad conclusion. So you could tell me that everybody, like 1,000 people would have to fit on one side of a dime, and it really wouldn't make a difference there, Brad, because you're just peddling bullshit at this point. And you're just using large numbers and ridiculous sizes and shit in order to try to convince your audience that you're correct and that the human population disproves an old Earth. And it's just getting pathetic at this point. The fact that you're preaching in a church about scientific matters and getting it all wrong and everybody's just eating it up, I think, like, that's sickening to me.
And we hope they use deodorant, right? All right, what if we do this? What if we redo set it up again? This time we start with 2 people, we'll call them Adam and Eve, but we start just 6,000 years ago. Same generation time, 42 years, same family size, 2.4 kids per family. You run the math, lo and behold, population should be about 8.34 billion. You say, wow, Brad, that's a whole lot closer to reality.
Using your fucked up math that was meant to prove your point? Yeah, that sounds a bit more reasonable, but just because you can create some kind of fucked up math where you just do random shit in there for whatever the fuck reason to come out with the number that you want it to say, sure. But also, using this method right here totally contradicts your Christian view or your Old Testament or fundamentalist view of the Bible. I don't know if you guys remember, but people used to live to hundreds of years old. This wasn't like fucking a 42-year lifespan for these people. Adam lived to be, what, 900 fucking years old? How can you sit there and be like, using the same shit for Adam and all the other fucks that lived at that time, we get the more appropriate number? When that literally contradicts your entire Christian idea, fundamentalist Christian idea of the Old Testament. That's just something I just noticed, and I thought it was fucking hilarious. But also, just to point out more scientifically, a population of 2 individuals would not be able to sustain a population. There's this thing called a minimum viable population. This is the minimum number of organisms you would need in a population in order for that population to actually thrive and survive. Now, this would be a population that's dependent upon like sexual reproduction, not asexual reproduction or any other kind of means of reproduction. This would be where genetics would come in as far as like the sexual reproduction part. So that's what you would need. This MVP is what you would need in order for that population to stave off genetic defects from interbreeding as well as genetic drift. So what you would need for a human population is about 160 people to stave off both of those. Typically, when we look at population numbers, they go by the 50 and 500 rule, right? 50/500. Basically, in order to stave off any kind of interbreeding genetic mutations, you would need at least 50 individuals. But in order to stave off like genetic drift, you would need more like 500, generally speaking, for any for any species out there that reproduces sexually. So what you have to consider here is the fact that what he's saying is that you give two people the time to reproduce like this, they fuck each other to hell, and apparently there's just no consequences for any kind of genetic mutations. His entire premise here is bullshit. It's totally contradictory to his fundamentalist view of Christianity and the science about population growth, about how groups of organisms can even survive. All of that is totally fucker.
But still, you're too much. We know we just clicked over 7 billion, right? Right. But what happened about 4,000 years ago that knocked us back to just 8? The flood.
Everything works out with my bullshit math because I wanted it to work out that way. Obviously. Obviously, his bullshit math is going to work out perfectly for the bullshit story that he wants to tell. Because he starts with his answer, and that's how many people are on this earth whenever this was fucking recorded. How many people are on the earth? And now what we're going to do is meddle with the math until we get that number, considering the flood as well as the current population size. So that's how he came up with his fucked up math.
Folks, numbers don't lie. Man-made theories might, but the numbers don't. And so use these opportunities when you're talking to your kids about math, when you're talking to them about the census that we have to take every so many years. Talk to them about how the fact that, you know what, this really supports the biblical genealogies. In fact, we've been taking numbers since the book of Numbers. It's one of the most exciting books, right?
What's funny about that is that the numbers in the book of Numbers are completely wrong and do not match what we find in reality. We've been able to find like archaeological physical evidence that the numbers that are reported in the book of Numbers are all bullshit and inflated. It's almost like Trump went back in time and gave the Israelites advice on how to pump their numbers up. It's like, just write down different numbers. Nobody will know. Everybody will just take it as the gospel truth. Haha, you don't know that word yet.
And yet, here's what our kids are getting a steady right here. Big Bang, explosion. Look at the last sentence on this page. In a closed universe, a Big Bang may occur once every 80 to 100 billion years. Somebody show me the science in that sentence right there.
If I could show you the science that might lead you to that, which I feel like this is kind of an old book. It's based on old information. Science is always changing, which is a good thing. It's not like we have a science textbook from the first century and we've just stuck to that shit. If that were the case, then we would think that air is bad and contains spirits that infest your asshole in order to give you ass cancer as well as any other kind of illness, right? I mean, we would think that like mental illness was a demon infesting your body and shit, and you gotta cast it out by exorcisms and shit like that. We don't have like a single absolute book that gives us all the answers. Science is a discipline that continuously refines itself, that takes new information and figures out the best representation of the reality that we live in. And that's a magnificent fucking thing. I could explain to you like how they might come up with that number, but it really doesn't matter because you're not going to be able to understand it anyways. Anybody that's eating your shit up with like a fucking giant spoon is not going to be able to understand the science no matter what. So regardless of how many times a Big Bang may occur, we know that it happened at least once, and so it can happen again. That's really all you got to know. It's the same concept as with evolution. We know evolution happened and is still happening. So like abiogenesis, evolution, all of that could definitely happen in another place in this universe and most likely has. We may never know this other organism that lives out there, but the fact is that if it happened once, it can definitely happen again. There's nothing that restricts it from happening again.
Because you might as well say once upon a time. That's like fairy tale stuff right there. I had a youth minister one time ask me the question that you see on the screen. You know, could God have used a Big Bang to get us to where we are today? Before I answer that question,
he's gonna bullshit you a little bit, but in all seriousness, could God have used a Big Bang? Sure. Not the Christian God, because I don't think the Christian God exists. But Could some ambiguous deity figure that exists outside of our reality, could that thing actually exist and actually use the Big Bang to create a universe? Sure. I will go as far as to say that this deity figure could have goat seed and caused the universe to come into existence out of that horrible nightmare of a situation. Just because he could have done it doesn't mean that he actually did do it. And just because we don't know how it actually happened doesn't mean that by default God is the answer. That's what all of these religious apologists want to jump to, is the fact that science can't specifically cite how the Big Bang occurred or why it occurred like they can with the rain cycle. And so obviously the automatic assumption is God did it. And I have this video ending on a very specific note that highlights my exact problem with him just jumping to the God conclusion.
I want you to think about how many of those textbooks actually talk about where the original matter for that Big Bang came from. They don't do that, do they?
Well, no, they wouldn't, because there's no concrete scientific theory about how that all happened. There are hypotheses out there about how it could have happened, how everything could have been compressed into a singularity. I think the most favored explanation right now is that there was a quantum scalar field, the inflaton field, that fluctuated from a false vacuum state into a true vacuum state. And when it did that, it released an immense amount of energy, which was the inflation event. And then it continued expanding from that point. But this huge inflation event filled our universe with inflaton particles, which was a type of energy that then transformed into what would become the matter that we have now. So it's really just energy changing states from one state to another state. We have been able to test and experiment for these quantum scalar fields to be able to produce these large amounts of energy when they fluctuate from a false vacuum to a true vacuum. Brad Harrub, or his entire audience, even if I could explain to them the quantum scalar field, all this other shit, they still wouldn't accept it. Or if they accepted it, then they would just say, oh, well, obviously, God dinged that thing with his dick, and that's what caused the inflation of the universe. Obviously, God damn it. We all know that God has a tiny dick. Come on now. They would never say God has a tiny dick. I don't know, honey. These Catholic fucks will diddle a kid, but they won't talk about God's tiny dick. I don't buy it.
We talked last night about the fact that what they really do is they say, well, you know, maybe it came from this little bitty point in space. In fact, let me back up. This is the 2002 issue of Discover, where supposedly everything in the universe came from that red dot. They say that's the actual size of the universe at 10 to the minus 34 seconds from the Big Bang.
No. That would have been like just prior to the Big Bang. At 10 to the negative 34 seconds, it would have exponentially inflated to a size a little bit smaller than what the universe is now. I say little bit in a relative manner because it's not really a little bit, it's actually a huge number. But in relation to the size of the universe, it is a little bit smaller. So no, what you said there was a total misrepresentation of even what the singularity hypothesis is. But even then, the singularity hypothesis is perfectly in line with the quantum scalar field hypothesis that I just mentioned. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean that it's bullshit. All of that math that you presented earlier was literally bullshit. This is literally scientific hypotheses that hold more plausibility than your God hypothesis. Like, he's just standing on a pulpit saying a whole bunch of shit to people that already believe the thing that he's trying to convince them of. What's the fucking point in this? What is the point in this entire lecture that he's giving this audience in this church? It's pointless. Casey was saying that it reinforces. Well, that's my point. These are people that don't want to actually understand reality. These are people that just want to be told that their beliefs are scientifically grounded. They're wanting to be fed bullshit.
Actual size. Look at the subheading. I'm going to blow it up so you guys can read it. It says the universe burst into something from absolutely nothing. Zero. Nada.
Where the citation fucking needed? Where are you even getting this? You have no way for us to know where in the hell this quote came from. It came from his slideshow, obviously. But I mean, no scientist would say absolutely nothing. The nothing that science describes is totally different from the absolute nothing kind of bullshit that religious apologists often put out there. I don't know where this came from. I don't think that an actual astrophysicist or theoretical physicist or anything like that would have said this. We don't have any idea where this came from. It should not be incumbent upon me or you, the audience, to sit there and fucking Google the quotes that he has on the screens. We shouldn't have to Google for the citations for these quotes to see who said them and their reasons for saying this shit. We shouldn't have to do that. He should provide the context. He should provide the citations. The fact that he's not says that he's trying to be dubious or he's trying to present some kind of narrative that he wants to tell.
As it got bigger, it became filled with even more stuff that came from absolutely nowhere. Okay, now again, let me ask you, where's the science in that?
There is no fucking science because you just pulled it out of your gaping asshole. Well, that's where he got it from. Like, none of this is science. You created a straw man and it was like, see, where the fuck is the science in this straw man that I just fucking created right here, huh? I didn't use any science to construct this motherfucker. Yeah, you fucking straw man. Boosh! Die, motherfucker. That's right. Hail God. Woo! I feel like the thing that he needs to do right now is he needs to, like, I don't know. He needs to do a keg stand. It's like, am I right, y'all? I'm right. Time to do a keg stand. Keg stand.
Because that right there, my friends, that requires a whole lot more faith than saying, in the beginning, God created.
Yeah. It's so much easier to just pull an explanation out of your ass and say, God did it. Do you see how this is a thought-stopping mechanism? That whenever somebody says, oh, that's just God, or, oh, God did it, or, you know, God wanted this to happen. Any time anybody says that to you, it is a thought-stopping technique. They want you to stop thinking about whatever in the fuck question you're thinking about. Where did this universe came from? How does this quantum theory bullshit make sense? How does any, can I understand any of this? Can I pick up a quantum theory book and understand it? Yeah, you can. Or you can listen to his bullshit and stop thinking about it because it's really fucking uncomfortable to think about how this universe could have naturally come into existence. That doesn't mean that a God doesn't exist, but at the same time, he has to, because like he has to present it in this ridiculous way because he's a Christian fundamentalist. He is a creationist person, right? He has to believe in the Genesis account. He has to believe that two people were fashioned by God. God one day got some allergies while he was walking through Eden. He sneezed on some dirt and it all formulated into a guy. And then the guy started bitching because he couldn't fucking procreate with all the other animals. Trust me, he fucking tried. So God slipped him a roofie and then took his rib and like rubbed it really hard and fashioned a woman out of his own fucking rib. Adam's rib. It totally seems reasonable. God did it, right? God did. Obviously, God, when you sprinkle a little bit of God on shit, anything can happen. Am I right? I am personally very angry about this bullshit. If you couldn't tell, he's put into this position where people are listening to him and they think that he is regurgitating scientific facts or that he is bringing up holes in scientific theories. They don't understand that he's creating straw men and presenting them to the audience as if they were actual scientific theories. And that just pisses me off. I feel like any reasonable person would be pissed off when somebody is obviously presenting bad information to a group of people. And the people are like, oh, yeah, totally. God did it. Yeah. God did it. Definitely. Like, that just, I don't know. That really pisses me off. Woo fucking saw. Thank you, heathens, for joining me tonight. All in all, I'm not impressed by this video. I found that he just threw out a whole bunch of bad information. He made up these different types of math in order to prove his point. He started from his conclusion and worked backward, even with the math. Brad just presented bullshit information even after he left the math behind. He still presented wrong information about the beginning of this universe. He presented wrong information about the singularity. He presented wrong information about what scientists say about the beginning of this universe. He just continuously, at every single point in this video, presents straw man information as scientific information, and it's just aggravating. But if you're going to be leaving out right now, then please leave me a comment. I'd love to know what you guys think about Brad's sermon here. I'm going to have the full sermon up in the description. So anyways, I hope you guys have a lovely weekend, and I will see you heathens later. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.